Yeah.
Hello, beautiful world. It's me again with my good buddy, Karina Barley from Australia. And I've known you for like at least 15 years now, if not longer,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, it must be, gosh, it's probably more heading towards 20, I would
Ooh,
think, because it was about 2005, 2006
really? That
when,
long ago?
yeah,
Wow, that's
yeah,
amazing. Isn't that
I know,
wild? Oh my God. And look how much has changed for all of us in the world ever
I
since.
know. It's
It's
incredible.
incredible. But the moment I most remember with you is you were sitting in that chair at Jill's house and you said, I am going to evolve education for the world. And
Yeah.
that was probably about 10 years ago, maybe. I do 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, maybe a little longer, like 12. So that was probably more like 12 years ago,
Yeah,
thereabouts.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you
So,
already had a master's in education at the time, I think, and now you're a
yeah,
PhD, an official doctor of
PhD. Yeah.
education or whatever the term is. So do you want to just
Yeah,
do a
it's a
quick intro of
go.
you?
Yeah, so well, oh, I feel like it's repeating on me, but yeah, I'm a educator in Australia. I work as a tutor and lecturer at Monash University, where I teach pre-service teachers, so teachers training to become teachers. I also teach support staff. I'm not sure what you call them in the UK, but teacher aides, support,
Yeah.
teacher support staff as well. So I teach prospective support staff. I also have written a number of courses, up over 20 professional development courses for educators, and I present all over Australia, including the world occasionally when I get to travel. And then I also work as a consultant. So I consult on for various kids who have a disability or who are considered having a disability or neurodiversity. And so I work with families and then I consult with schools and things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm also a mum of four and a grandmother of three, or grandy of three.
And I think you were one of the leading voices for autism and Asperger's and things like that way back. You were talking about it, I think, probably it was just starting to get popular or into the human consciousness about these kids that were coming with a new way of operating.
New sort of, yeah. So, yeah, that's a good 12 years ago, thereabouts, where it was autism was still very much considered a really negative thing, and your parents would get a diagnosis of autism, and look, I'm not trying to say that it can't be challenging, because it definitely can, and there's autism is a spectrum for a reason. There's some very high functioning kids with autism, and then there's any along the sort of spectrum, and which can be quite profound with no language, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah,
um so, but early on, I recognized that there was this difference in the way that they think, and the way that they approach the world, and the way that they navigate in the world, and it just that absolutely fascinated me. So I think I was, even way back then, they were still talking about cures for autism and all those kinds of things. Well, we no longer speak like that. We now do recognize that autism is what we call a neurodiversity, and ostensibly it is that they have a different way of viewing the world and navigating the world, and so I find that particularly fascinating. And from an education point of view, um, I'm really interested in how can I work with that to help elevate the potential of that particular child, really, or human. I often work with adults as well. So
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
that's kind of how that evolved.
yeah. I kind of remember you saying something to me the last time we talked, something about you could teach anyone or you could work with anyone. Do you want to say some more about that? Because I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, one of the challenges that's happening at the moment, and it's happening worldwide, or at least I guess in the um Western world, as it were, but in Australia, we're talking now about where all schools must be ready for what we call inclusive education. So what that means is that all children, have a right by law, our Disability Discrimination Act, as well as global forces like the UN and so on, have all stated that all children have a right to education, and they have a right to education on the same, there's very specific language, on the same basis as their peers who don't have a disability. But it doesn't look like that in reality. We still have our our disabled community are still the most discriminated against. They have less opportunities to go on to successful careers and successful work, and they equally have less opportunities to also go into higher education. So we're still not included, and if we think about it, there's still a very much, exclusion of those with disabilities in our sort of overall world. We're starting to see more of that. And so one of the challenges for teachers, and one of the things that I'm doing in terms of my writing for teaching teachers, is that they don't believe they're trained to teach children with differences or diversity. Whereas, and I think if I was to go through my iteration as an educator, I might have felt the same way. But um, but what I felt was that the more educated I became, but the more that I actually worked with various children, irrespective of what, their differences may be, that it's on me to work out how I can educate them. What are the resources that I can use? What are the strategies that I can use? And the vital piece to that is knowing the student. So we could have the best curriculum on the planet. We could have, fantastic classrooms with the most innovative technology and resources, lots of money and resources and whatever. But if we haven't connected with our students, we haven't, one-on-one where we know who they are, know how they work, know how they learn, and all those kinds of things, then all of that will just collapse.
Yeah.
So I guess my belief is now that it wouldn't matter who, and I've taught nonverbal individuals who have been um, um, diagnosed as having an intellectual disability, with IQs at say 70. I've taught from that end of the scale all the way over to the gifted scale, and anywhere in between. So I no longer would feel scared about that at
Do you
all. In
know,
fact, I'd find it interesting and a fascinating challenge.
yeah, I think it's because you're an innovator. So I don't think like a lot of people say, I learned to do it this way, so here's how I do this, And I think you stand in the moment and innovate in every instance according to what's needed. But you're also a visionary. So I think you're also in the moment seeing what's possible and working towards what's possible, innovating how you get there. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's where some of the barriers occur for educators and even for parents to a degree as
Yeah,
well, is I always get the question, oh, can you give us specific strategies on what to do in the classroom? I mean, I could give you 100, but is that specifically right for that particular student, right? Because
yeah,
unless we know the student, we can't match the strategy. It's sort of backwards in the way that people think. They think if we've got all the strategies, then we can therefore achieve what we achieve. Whereas my preface is, let's forget all of that, because the strategies isn't what matters. What matters is that we're understanding the way that a student learns. So a really good example of that is a young man now. He's 22 years of age, who I've worked with. He's in the US, I'm in Australia. We do Zoom calls for nearly 30 minutes where we're still working on his reading. He has a range of disabilities. He's autistic. He also has OCD. He has I'm not sure what his IQ level is, but has, significant learning disabilities and so on. And we've managed. It's slow progress. You've got to be patient in this business. So slow and patient progress. But he will now sit with me for 30 minutes, and we will go through various, words and letters and all those kinds of things. And whereas I couldn't even get him to sit for 2 minutes to
Yeah.
start with. So over the years, it's kind of evolved to that. But what I've actually recently, or earlier this year, discovered something really important about him, and that is that if I show him a word, let's say it's then, he can't read it, but if I was to say THEN, he knows what the word is. So he's
Oh,
learning through the spelling out of letters. Now, I think that's connected back to when in his early years, his parents used finger spelling all the time, to communicate with him, even though he wasn't hearing, didn't have a hearing impairment. That's what they used to be able to communicate. So he's evolved and learned by doing that. So I've now changed everything around to where I kind of use that as, because I had to think, well, how do I use that as a process to actually then elevate his reading, and which I've done. I've kind of used slides that animate and just do the letters one at a time. And he's again, it's not going to be fast progress, but it's definitely progress. So
yeah. I have a theory, and I'd be interested to hear if you think it relates to all the ones you've worked with. Teachers, teachers' assistants, autism, Asperger's, educators, all of it. So that everyone has a specific, unique genius in them.
mhm.
And then until we get to discover what that specific, unique genius is, they're kind of flailing about in the world.
Mm. Yeah,
Because they're
yeah,
different than everybody else, or they have something
exactly.
extraordinarily
Yeah,
different and unique to find
yeah.
their way. And that's why I think education has to have more innovation in it, as well as the seeking of genius. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I walk into classrooms and they're the same classrooms I taught in 25 years ago. The same classes I was taught in 50
Yeah,
years ago.
yeah. You're talking about the
It's
content, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, just the content, but the look and feel of the classroom. They've still got
yeah.
the desks and the tables and the this and the. I mean, there's some really innovative schools that are doing some incredible things. But coming back to genius, it's sort of our concept of what genius is. So, people will think genius and think that you have to be a multi PhD and
Yeah,
who can read a book a day and whatever. That's not the
it's
only
not.
genius
Yeah,
that there is. So
yeah,
another example, and I might have shared this story with you, is a boy that I've worked with, or again, he's a young man now, he's 22 years of age, who can't read or write at all and comprehend, yet can actually listen and comprehend. So you can read to him, um, and he's worked out magnificently how to use text to speech options for him. He's autistic, has an intellectual disability, and has a hearing impairment as well.
mm,
So this, when I started working with him, he was about 14, 15. And so he just could not ever grasp reading words on on paper or on a screen. But if you told him, he's got a memory like there's no tomorrow. Like he can remember everything from dates to, what people were wearing. It's fascinating. One day I had a session with him, went to his house, and here he was playing guitar. I'm like, oh, how did you learn to play guitar, Brody? And I said his name, but anyway, it doesn't matter. How did you learn to play guitar? And he said, oh, I learned by watching YouTube videos. I
yeah,
was like, what? What do you mean? I
yeah,
couldn't do that,
yeah,
so he loves the old songs, right? So he's
yeah.
really fascinated with old songs and all of that kind of stuff. And so he finds a song, finds it on YouTube. If he's not sure, he now knows how to navigate to find the chords for a particular. So he's not just strumming, he's actually using chords and intricately playing.
Amazing.
And so he then, by the time he got to 17, he wanted to work with aged care. And what he wanted to do was go sing him his songs And he said, I just want to make them all happy. I'm
Oh,
like, that is amazing. And so I had to fight this system though, honestly, because they kept saying he won't be able to, because he had to do what's called a certificate 3 and certificate 4 in aged care. And, because there's certain things they have to know, obviously, to be safe in the workplace and safe for others. And I argued that he could. And they said, but he can't read or write. I said, yes, but he can listen and learn. So all he needed was someone who I worked with him, and then there was somebody else that worked with him. So he had a scribe that could type the words for him and then read out, when there was a question and answer, read out the questions where he had to do quizzes and things like that. Now, not only did he pass, but he got student of the year for the entire of Victoria for this
wow.
particular organization. It was it was unbelievable. And then we went and got him. He really wanted to be able to drive his car, and so in I don't know if in the UK, I'm imagining it does. They can now do assisted tests because he kept failing the written test, and so they now do an assisted test where they read him the questions and he is able to answer the questions. I went with him. Now I don't know if you've ever been to Vic Roads or anything similar, government agencies, the dullest place on the planet, just about. And Brody went in and did his test and came out jumping up and down, so excited because he passed. The whole of the Vic Roads were jumping up and so excited for him. And he said he's 17 years of age and said, I've never passed anything before.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
As like just struck me so much. So uh, fast forward a number of years, he's now been working in aged care for 3 years. They absolutely love him. They give him a song and he goes and learns how to do it. And then he also, he forms these lovely connections with all the people that he works with.
Yeah.
He's learned, he has to do handovers, and so he uses speech to text options, and they say they're the most comprehensive handovers they've ever seen.
How wonderful.
And
Oh,
he drives to work, he's got a license, and he's paying taxes, and he's part of, society, right?
yeah.
That's genius to me,
That's genius. Yeah. Yeah,
so
exactly.
it,
It's finding
yeah,
a way to use what is essentially inherent and contributory in them, and then finding an innovative way to deliver that into the world.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what he can give is not just, he really is, he's one of these people, like when you see him, when I fractured my wrist, he rang me every second day to see how I was. And
Uh,
he's like, I can't wait to see you so I can give you a hug and help you feel better. And he's just, and when he does see you, he's like, oh, you look so beautiful today, darling. He'll say to me, it's the
how
sweetest thing
beautiful.
ever.
Yeah.
And like that's a gift to me, to be able to be so and it's genuine from his heart and soul that's how he really feels. So
Oh, that's so
um
beautiful. So
yeah.
I love that whole example. But if we then take, you remember you saying I want to evolve the education in the whole world, right? That's a whopper thing. And I think we can all admit that education has moved very much in the last 50 years. It's still kind of essentially like that was 1950s when I was going through,
Mm,
regular
yeah,
school.
I was in
It's
the
probably
last
not much
100 years.
different today
No, it's
than it
not.
was then, 70 years on, you know?
We've integrated some technology and some very, there are some innovative things happening in education in pockets.
Yeah.
But we're still seeing and the attitude toward education um has changed. Teachers used to be revered, they're no longer revered. There's a
Oh,
whole lot of
really?
I mean, no, I mean, we've got, I don't want to turn it political, but we've got a certain political contender for the presidency who's saying he's going to completely strip public education of all funding.
Wow.
I mean, it's just outrageous to me that education could ever be a political football. So, but having said that, I absolutely do agree. We must transform. There was Sir Ken Robinson from the UK. He's no longer with us, sadly, but he used to talk about that not much has changed in 100 years, because the education system that we're still working from was founded in the Industrial Revolution. And so kids were educated ostensibly to be workers, so, and we haven't sort of shifted from that idea. And even when I hear politicians now who'll talk about, oh, we've got to go back to the 3 Rs. No, we don't. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I swore.
That's okay.
It's me. You have to get that. It's just a nonsense concept that we have to go back to the 3 Rs, because that's not really what I think education should be about, fostering that genius, right?
Yes, me
So
too.
finding, like one of the two questions I'd like to ask kids as they walk through a school door is like, what are you really good at?
Yeah.
What do you love?
Yes.
They're two very powerful questions. So let's then foster that, and it's like, oh, how are we going to do that for 30 kids in the classroom? You know what? You get them doing what they love doing. Our discipline issues are minimized hugely. I've never seen a kid who's doing what they love doing, behaving badly. They're not, because they're happy doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we've got to get away from this idea that everybody has to be the same as well. Like, I look at my son-in-law, who's he used to do all the mechanical work for Black Hawk helicopters. He was in the American Army. He can pull a car apart, the motor and and put it all back together. Man, that just blows my mind. It's
Me
just,
too.
that's genius.
Yeah.
So, and we need those kind of people.
Yeah.
We need the Brodies that are the example I gave you before. Because he's got a gift of something that very few people have.
Yeah. I agree.
So that's where I think, we've got to kind of shift from this, and because it really is, schools are still bells ringing, let's go in, form into lines, sit in our nice neat little chairs, and here we'll do literacy in the morning, numeracy next, and then we'll do all the various other curriculum things to fit everything in there, whereas it's so much more than that.
Yeah. As a
There's a wonderful
visionary, how
oh,
would
sorry,
you how would you see us going forward as a world with the unleashing of genius in everyone?
oh, wow.
That's a whopper
Can you
question.
imagine? I mean, we'd have so much innovation, in terms of, if we could let a kid who loves to code, let's say, so much innovation in technology, or another kid who loves to paint, we could see some extraordinary kind of work. I recently went to a Da Vinci exhibition here in Melbourne. He was fantastic. Whoa, prolific, like work. And how he worked was he designed everything on paper. He actually wrote backwards for most of his life.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's fascinating, completely fascinating.
Wow.
Um, and again, they sort of believe probably, is neurodiverse in some way, but the artistic works were just incredible. But I'm not sure we would have a Da Vinci today in a school that would be
Mm.
evolved to
Yeah.
that level, who would be allowed to write backwards because he wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
whereas I'd be all for that. You write backwards as much as you want.
Yeah. Exactly.
Other teachers would be like, oh, but we can't read it. It's like, I don't care, as long as he's writing, that's all and
Yeah.
then creating,
Yeah.
that's all that matters. So I'm not sure sort of I mean, I used to do this. It's really strange, like way back when I first started my teaching career. So I don't know, 25, I've been teaching for 35 years, but about 25 years ago, I used to do I started doing little mini visualization type things. And I still remember doing them. And one of them would be, close your eyes and imagine you're walking into school, and imagine that there was a room that just had a whole room full of Lego, and another room that we had a whole room full of baking goods, or had another room that was a big sports arena, and another room that was, I don't know, name anything, clay and pencils and whatever, and what would, and then we could have another room full of technology, we could have all of that. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I envision. Like, how amazing would that be? You could have a 5-year-old with a 10-year-old working together on a project,
Yeah.
that they're united by because they love the thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if we could create a school like that, and I've seen some schools who do some innovative things. There's a school in Victoria, in Dandenong, that what they've done is created these rooms. Like, one has a rocket ship, another one has a pirate ship, and and then they've got all these little hutches, and you go in there. It's unbelievable. Like, there's no standard tables or anything like that. There's a clay area, there's Lego, and then in this little rocket ship, there's all these little pockets, and kids are sitting everywhere on bean bags in front of computers, some with books. None of them are not active. They're all doing something, but
Wow.
they're all doing something very individual and unique.
Yeah.
And they work with things like, the child that designs their own curriculum. This is what I'd like to learn.
Yeah.
So the teachers guides them by, so getting all the things that they need to do. Well, how will you do that? How will you research? How will you, write it? Let's work on this particular piece of writing, etc. So we're still doing all the curriculum things,
Yeah.
but just in a more kind of innovative way.
Yeah. Just as you're talking, so you know me, I'm for unleashing genius in everyone. I think that's the answer to the whole world's everything. But
Yes.
also I've been observing and kind of in a way researching, you could say, greatness. And to me, greatness is how we contribute our genius to the world. And
Mm.
I'm going to use the example of two football players, which is suddenly I'm watching football because I'm a Taylor Swift fan. So I'm watching Travis
Oh,
Kelce. And because I
all
watched
right.
Travis
Okay.
Kelce and the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm now watching Patrick Mahomes, who's the quarterback. And
Yeah.
that whole team and they're 6-0 in wins already this year, and they've done 2 Super Bowl wins already. So, but Patrick Mahomes, when he started, I think I saw something that said, somebody said, "Oh, you never be a quarterback." Right in
Mm.
university. And Travis Kelce was suspended for smoking marijuana, and his brother went to and saved him and put him in his room and got him to finish
Yeah.
his education and go into college football. But they operate so uniquely together, those two and that team. And even the coach, Andy Reid, is a very unusual coach. And what I see in that team as they're now, Patrick Mahomes is now called the greatest of all time quarterbacks.
Mm. Wow. Yeah.
As he
Yeah.
innovates, he has a relationship to his team that's beyond friendship. He kind of,
Mm.
they know where everybody is.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, and they do unusual behind the back passes and
Mm.
stuff
Yeah.
that's just extraordinary to watch. And it's like watching developing greatness through the
Mm.
unleashing of unique genius and
Mm. I agree.
someone believing in you. Because I
Yeah.
think if someone doesn't get you and believe in you, you can have your genius, you can do it, but it becomes a struggle in the world to put that out. But
Mm.
when someone really believes in you, which is
Yeah.
what I think what you and I have been doing for
Well,
years as well.
yeah, exactly. There's a study from Harvard. I can't remember the year, but um, it's based on the philosophy of the one caring adult, and the difference between someone that succeeds and somebody, like Travis, that might go down the other way,
Yeah,
end up in jail or whatever. Is having one caring person or one
yeah,
caring adult that can kind of foster them along. And it's not always a parent,
yeah.
for obvious reasons, but
And that's in
I've
your case too, isn't it? Because I read your autoethnography and your PhD.
yeah.
That happened for you, didn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and I'll say today, without those caring adults, I'm not sure I'd be on the planet, let alone anything else innovative, being an innovator in education. But and that's again comes back to that connection piece.
Yeah,
It's the very first thing we need to do in any place of learning, or even in our workplaces, like we could apply this to everything. Thinking about sport, I think about my team, Richmond Tigers, that won, grand final after 38 years of not winning anything and just being, the laughing stock of the football, um, community here in Australia. They won the grand final, and when there was a lot of the sort of after conversations, it all came back to this connection that they built
Yes.
together.
Yeah.
There were two particular players, one Dustin Martin, who was my hero. He just retired, so that's very sad for me, but he was kind of the rougher type, similar to Travis. Tattoos, and then our captain Trent, who was very clean cut, raised by a good family, all that kind of stuff. And then they formed this unlikely connection, and then kind
Yeah.
of, spread that out to all the players. And
Yeah.
so, and I just have such a fundamental belief that in schools, if we do have this connection piece,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be, it could be teacher to student, it could be student to student, it could be, a peer, an older student or a younger student. It can be all of those fosterings of relationships, because when you feel part of a community, a tribe, whatever it is that you want to call it, then you're united by the same,
Yeah.
desire to create that genius even further,
Yeah.
so
It's
I
the
think
same.
teams are a really good example of that, sort of seeing teamwork like that and
Yeah.
successful
The
teams.
Kansas City Chiefs talk about themselves as family, even when a new
Mm,
player comes in. Like right now,
yeah,
they've lost top players to injuries. So they
yeah,
bring in a new player, and that new player gets all the touchdowns. Like,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
cheer for one another, and there's a bond in it. There's a
yeah.
recognition of something in one
A,
another.
a great, and one of the other things, I don't know if you watched the Paralympics. So I love the Olympics, but I really love the Paralympics. One of the things I loved about that, and you're seeing it seeping through in the other Olympics as well, but they cheer each other on, irrespective of
Yeah,
where they're from.
yeah,
They're happy to see the person that they've trained with, the person that they're connected with, and they're happy to see them succeed as well. I just find that absolutely, and you've seen it creep in a little bit in the mainstream as well.
yeah,
And that's the thing that I think we're missing by not having a fully inclusive society, is seeing this, what, like, I wish I could put it in words because it's really hard to, but seeing this absolute brilliance of all these wonderful people with their unique way of thinking and seeing the world,
yeah.
and loving on the world, that they could teach us a lot about how we
Oh,
could kind of
yeah,
unite.
yeah, yeah.
I'll come
So
back to
much so.
Brody again. Like, Brody and I barrack for different teams, and he taught me a big lesson. When we played them in one of the grand finals and ended up winning, and he called me as, "I'm really pleased for you that your team won." As if it had been me, I'm like, I'm not sure it would have been as gracious. "Oh, Brody, stop
Yeah.
teaching me lessons."
How beautiful is that? Yeah.
I know.
But when I look at kind of like how do you take a kind of a system that hasn't really moved much in 100 years, and is designed for similarity and sameness. I don't know that I think what we have to do is fundamentally change everybody
Mm,
to witness uniqueness, to celebrate the differences, to be the caring person, the uplifter
mm,
for someone else. That if that
yeah,
was a natural state for
mm,
everybody, that
yeah.
if we just sought the unleashing of genius and recognized it and celebrated it everywhere and then nurtured it and supported it, I think the system would have to change,
Mm.
you know?
Well, it would, and part of the problem is you meet most, I meet a lot of teachers, obviously.
Yeah,
They all have watched the Ken Robinson videos. If you go on YouTube, you'll find them. And that talks about the dismantle, he basically advocates for a dismantling of the current system.
yeah.
Um, he did, he's not here anymore, but and all teachers walk out going, yes, 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 yes. But it's not teachers who create the education department. It's our politicians who have
Yeah,
got no clue about education for the most part.
yeah.
They're basing their any kind of change they make on some kind of political agenda. So it's not for the appropriate agenda. And then we have parents who also have grown up with, oh, we have the 3 R's and we're all good. So that mantra is very built in. So how do we, it's the dismantling of that. I don't know how we kind of
Yeah.
make all that come together. But
Well, see, my
uh,
approach is don't try to go inside, like inside the system and dismantle and revision it. Revision society.
mm,
When you get society operating in a different way, everything will follow because
yeah.
it's fundamentally oriented. That's the work I've been up to at years. So, but you're the
Mm.
wonderful one who has the vision for education. So, any last
Yeah.
words about what you'd say about that?
Uh, um, I still believe we can achieve it, is what I believe. And I don't think it's as far. I used to think it was further away from perhaps my lifetime, but I'm not so sure about that because
Me too.
I have seen some exponential, growth in the last 5 years. So,
Yeah.
10 years we were talking about autism being, the worst diagnosis possible. And now we're celebrating it, thinking, oh, this is really interesting. What do we do with it? So,
Yeah.
I think the same is for education. I think, and the fact that we have I mean, I spoke to a parent yesterday who's 3 children with some kind of neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, other kind of challenges. And so parents are now, also saying, well, hang on, we're not quite sure that this system's working for us either. So, um, I don't think it's as far away as we think. So when I see that our education department has said, they've told schools you have to get ready to be more inclusive. It's like a requirement now. So they're speaking that kind of language, which I think is really important. So I think we just all have to kind of energize it, from that place of, how do we bring out the best genius in every single one of us?
Yeah.
What's that, and what would that world look like? It would have to look a whole lot different than what we have currently. you know?
Yeah. Well, that's you and I are both up to that one. Unleashing
Yeah,
genius in everyone. I think that's the way you create a world, a society, a culture that is innovative, that is creative, that is
yeah.
full of the passions and visions for life. And I'm really
Mm.
very, very hopeful, not more than hopeful. I know the future is in good hands. So,
Yeah, I sort of feel that too. And there are two other things that I'll say if that's all right. One thing is never assume. I say this to teachers all the time. Never assume that what you see on paper, that they have an IQ of 70 and this disability and that disability and whatever. Do not assume that that child doesn't have possibility and potential. They do.
fantastic.
You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second part is there is no such thing as normal. There's
Yeah.
no normal. There's no normal children. There's no disabled children and non-disabled children. Everybody is diverse and unique.
Yeah.
Every single one of us. So we kind of need to eliminate some of that from our language as well. And because
Yeah.
if we assume that there's a normal, then we're ascribing to something that just isn't real. So we want to, find that genius in everybody. And why would we want normal?
Well, I think the one of the things that I represent, and I would say you probably represent, and all of my friends represent, is that we are definitely not normal.
Exactly.
I started out that way, and my journey
Yeah.
has been to become bolder and more outrageous
Mm,
and more, unique,
yeah.
different, and in my own
Audacious.
way.
That's what
Audacious. Yeah.
I use the word in my PhD, audacious. It's
Yeah.
like that, that you go where no one fears to tread, in other words. But
Yeah.
I refuse to not have pink hair or purple hair or whatever. And I always say to my future teachers, I'll say, There's no, because they always like, they use the language of normal, the normal kids. I'm like, no, stop using that. That's
Yeah,
not appropriate language, and no one is normal. Like,
yeah.
I'm really good at writing, I'm pretty good at speaking, but don't ever ask me to do your taxes or give you directions because you'll end up in Timbuktu somewhere.
I get that completely. But and I will just say one last thing, which is that the overarching consciousness of us all is
Mm,
elevating, rising, rising, rising. And that consciousness is built on uniqueness and
mm,
differences and
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
celebration of who we are. And that consciousness is extraordinary. And what I see in the world is more kindness, more caring,
Mm,
more generosity. And
yeah.
you won't hear that in the news, but but who cares?
No,
It's what you
you
see all
forget, yeah.
around you.
We watch the news, we think that, it's all doom and gloom, and it's not. Even the most, tragic circumstances, we see extraordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, there was the wonderful during the hurricane that just happened, but an incredible video of the policeman going and rescuing the dog, wading through the flood waters to rescue a dog. It's just
Yeah.
like unbelievable. I'm like, you know, people people are kind to them and more, in my profession, I've met a lot of people from lots of different places around the world, and they all have the similar desire, which is to love their family,
Yeah.
to care for one another. Most people have that inherent sort of thing
I
in
think so
and
too.
to have the best for their families.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in a dire situation, they're pretty kind to others. And not
Yeah,
what the
yeah,
movies show us, but
yeah,
maybe some
right.
people like that. But no, I see a growing kindness in the world and a growing
Yeah,
care for each other, which I think is wonderful. So, yeah. So
yeah.
here's to all of us doing our unique genius stuff to make the world brighter and better, including
Absolutely.
innovating how we
Yeah,
learn and how we unleash that genius in the world. So,
yeah.
oh, thanks so much
Fantastic.
for
Oh,
that.
thank you.
It's been wonderful talking about it. So, if
Yeah.
anybody wants to see more from you, how do they do that?
So they can go to Karina Barley, just Google Karina Barley and you'll find me on Facebook and Instagram. And my email is Karina Barley, all one word. So KarinaBarley @gmail.com. Feel free to
Fantastic.
reach out. I'm always happy to chat with anybody, really, pretty much, who's reasonable.
Fantastic. I love it. Thanks so much for this. I
You're
really loved every
welcome.
second of it.
Thank you
So,
for inviting me. I appreciate it a lot.
all righty.